Penguin Random House Audio presents The Death of Truth, Notes on Falsehood in the Age of Trump, by Michiko Kakutani. Read by Tavia Gilbert.
For journalists everywhere, working to report the news. Introduction. Two of the most monstrous regimes in human history came to power in the 20th century, and both were predicated upon the violation and despoiling of truth, upon the knowledge that cynicism and weariness and fear can make people susceptible to the lies and false promises of leaders bent on unconditional power. As Hannah Arendt wrote in her 1951 book, The Origins of Totalitarianism, the ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not the convinced Nazi or the convinced communist, but people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction, in other words, the reality of experience, and the distinction between true and false, in other words, the standards of thought, no longer exist. What's alarming to the contemporary reader is that Arendt's words increasingly sound less like a dispatch from another century than a chilling mirror of the political and cultural landscape we inhabit today. A world in which fake news and lies are pumped out in industrial volume by Russian troll factories, emitted in an endless stream from the mouth and Twitter feed of the President of the United States, and sent flying across the world through social media accounts at lightning speed. Nationalism, tribalism, dislocation, fears of social change, and the hatred of outsiders are on the rise again, as people, locked in their partisan silos and filter bubbles, are losing a sense of shared reality and the ability to communicate across social and sectarian lines. This is not to draw a direct analogy between today's circumstances and the overwhelming horrors of the World War II era, but to look at some of the conditions and attitudes, what Margaret Atwood has called the danger flags in Orwell's 1984 and Animal Farm, that make a people susceptible to demagoguery and political manipulation, and nations easy prey for would-be autocrats. To examine how a disregard for facts, the displacement of reason by emotion, and the corrosion of language are diminishing the very value of truth, and what that means for America and the world. The historian knows how vulnerable is the whole texture of facts in which we spend our daily life, Arendt wrote in a 1971 essay, Lying in Politics. It is always in danger of being perforated by single lies, or torn to shreds by the organized lying of groups, nations, or classes, or denied and distorted, often carefully covered up by reams of falsehoods, or simply allowed to fall into oblivion. Facts need testimony to be remembered, and trustworthy witnesses to be established, in order to find a secure dwelling place in the domain of human affairs. The term truth decay, used by the Rand Corporation to describe the diminishing role of facts and analysis in American public life, has joined the post-truth lexicon that includes such now familiar phrases as fake news and alternative facts. And it's not just fake news, either. It's also fake science, manufactured by climate change deniers and anti-vaxxers, fake history, promoted by Holocaust revisionists and white supremacists, fake Americans on Facebook, created by Russian trolls, and fake followers and likes on social media, generated by bots. Trump, the 45th President of the United States, lies so prolifically and with such velocity that the Washington Post calculated that he'd made 2,140 false or misleading claims during his first year in office, an average of nearly 5.9 a day. His lies, about everything from the investigations into Russian interference in the election to his popularity and achievements to how much TV he watches, are only the brightest blinking red light of many warnings of his assault on democratic institutions and norms. He routinely assails the press, the justice system, the intelligence agencies, the electoral system, and the civil servants who make our government tick. Nor is the assault on truth confined to the United States. Around the world, waves of populism and fundamentalism are elevating appeals to fear and anger over reasoned debate, eroding democratic institutions, and replacing expertise with the wisdom of the crowd. False claims about the UK's financial relationship with the EU, emblazoned on a Vote Leave campaign bus, helped swing the vote in favor of Brexit, and Russia ramped up its sowing of disinformatia in the run-up to elections in France, Germany, the Netherlands, and other countries in concerted propaganda efforts to discredit and destabilize democracies. Pope Francis reminded us, there is no such thing as harmless disinformation. Trusting in falsehood can have dire consequences. Former President Barack Obama observed that one of the biggest challenges we have to our democracy is the degree to which we do not share a common baseline of facts. People today are operating in completely different information universes. And the Republican Senator Jeff Flake gave a speech in which he warned that 2017 was a year which saw the truth, objective, empirical, evidence-based truth, more battered and abused than any other in the history of our country, at the hands of the most powerful figure in our government. How did this happen? What are the roots of falsehood in the Trump era? How did truth and reason become such endangered species? And what does their impending demise portend for our public discourse and the future of our politics and governance? That is the subject of this book. It's easy enough to see Trump, a candidate who launched his political career on the original sin of birtherism, as a black swan who ascended to office because of a perfect storm of factors, a frustrated electorate still hurting from the backwash of the 2008 financial crash, Russian interference in the election, and a deluge of pro-Trump fake news stories on social media. A highly polarizing opponent who came to symbolize the Washington elite that populists decried, and an estimated $5 billion in free campaign coverage from media outlets obsessed with the views and clicks that the former reality TV star generated. If a novelist had concocted a villain like Trump, a larger-than-life, over-the-top avatar of narcissism, mendacity, ignorance, prejudice, boorishness, demagoguery, and tyrannical impulses, not to mention someone who consumes as many as a dozen Diet Cokes a day, she or he would likely be accused of extreme contrivance and implausibility. In fact, the President of the United States often seems less like a persuasive character than some manic cartoon artist's mashup of Ubu-Wa, Triumph the Insult comic dog, and a character discarded by Molière. But the more clownish aspects of Trump the personality should not blind us to the monumentally serious consequences of his assault on truth and the rule of law, and the vulnerabilities he has exposed in our institutions and digital communications. It is unlikely that a candidate who had already been exposed during the campaign for his history of lying and deceptive business practices would have gained such popular support, were portions of the public not somehow blasé about truth-telling, and were there not more systemic problems with how people get their information and how they've come to think in increasingly partisan terms. With Trump, the personal is political, and in many respects, he is less a comic book anomaly than an extreme, bizarro world apotheosis of many of the broader, intertwined attitudes undermining truth today, from the merging of news and politics with entertainment, to the toxic polarization that's overtaken American politics, to the growing populist contempt for expertise. These attitudes, in turn, are emblematic of dynamics that have been churning beneath the surface of daily life for years, creating the perfect ecosystem in which Veritas, the goddess of truth, as she was depicted by Goya in a famous print titled "Truth Has Died," could fall mortally ill. For decades now, objectivity, or even the idea that people can aspire toward ascertaining the best available truth, has been falling out of favor. Daniel Patrick Moynihan's well-known observation, "Everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not to his own facts," is more timely than ever. Polarization has grown so extreme that voters in red state America and blue state America have a hard time even agreeing on the same facts.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?